So now on to our final award for the evening, the Distinguished Alumni Lifetime Achievement Award, which acknowledges exceptional contribution to a professional field and to the community. This award recognises integrity and an impressive ability to inspire excellence in others. And the recipient of the 2012 Distinguished Alumni Lifetime Achievement Award is Professor Emeritus Ron McCallum. Ladies and gentlemen, Monash University pays tribute to Ron McCallum for his exceptional contribution to human rights, education, research, and the community. Professor McCallum is accompanied tonight by his daughter, Catherine. Please join me in congratulating Professor Emeritus Ron McCallum.
Lord Mayor Robert Doyle, my fellow alumnus, Chancellor Dr. Ed Finkel and Dr. Elizabeth Finkel, Vice-Chancellor Professor Ed Burns and Melissa, Dean of Law, I always acknowledge Deans of Law, my great friend Professor Ari Freiberg, senior judges, my word, you've got big. I remember you in class. Distinguished guests, members of the Monash Council, family, ladies and gentlemen. It's an extraordinary honour to receive this award. And in the few moments available to me, let me explain a little about what it means to me and what my life has been with this great university. Before going on, may I follow the Lord Mayor and pay my deep and humble respects to the traditional owners of this land, for their elders past and present, and for all elders past and present in our great land. I came to Monash 45 years ago, in 1967. It was the first of the new law schools, the first law school of the 1960s for what would later become educating the baby boomer generation and beyond. And I owe a great deal to its then dean, the late and the great Professor David Durham, who shortly afterwards became Vice-Chancellor of Melbourne University, another great university. There were discussions between Melbourne and Monash law schools as to who would take me, and David said he would take me. There was also another great man at that law school, Professor Laurie McCready, who many of you will know. David taught me in first year, and it was his example I used 35 years later when I found myself Dean of a law school. David had the idea that what we needed in a new law school was lawyers who were more socially aware, who were more fitted to the community. Without criticising any of the earlier law schools, that was his aim. And he also had the aim to concentrate and focus upon excellence. So at the end of my first year, I found myself in an honours group selected after first year where we had separate classes in every subject, compulsory or optional, and separate assessments. That education, which would be hard to replicate today, given our financial shortages, etc., I was paid the wonderful benefits of it. And I want to acknowledge another blind friend of mine in the community, Kate McKenzie, who's here tonight. Kate, I can't tell you how overwhelmed I are that you're here this evening. She and I shared a study for about 4 years, got up to a bit of mischief. I think went to the pub on Fridays for lunch, didn't seem to do much in the afternoon. I then became a teacher of law. And the video was right. The one thing I wanted to do was read, and I really had to be nice to people to get them to read to me until computers came along. And my students read to me. It was far easier to get them to read criminal law than property law. But they always read labour law, and there's my dear, or second mother, Lois Dory, in the audience, who'd been reading to me in those days from 74 to the late 80s when computers came in. I worked long and hard to keep up an academic career. But I loved classes. Some of you will know Lecture Theatre 3 in the law school with the big steps. I was always late, and I'd come running down and I'd slip, fall, jump up, and then I couldn't find the lecture theatre. The lectern. I remember one year one student said, "Getting warm, Ron." I said, "Look, guys, if you want a class, find me the expletive lectern." These days we're full of intensive courses, both at the University of Sydney and here in other universities. We seem to undervalue the classroom. We think because it's on the net we can read it. The purpose of teaching is to teach apprentice lawyers how to think like lawyers, to measure the arguments, to argue to and fro. How would we solve this problem? What would we do for our clients? What would the other side be thinking? You know, I was teaching at Sydney Law School last year and a student put up an argument. Said, "Are you surprised by my argument, Ron?" I said, "No, I first heard it 35 years ago, but make it again." It's been a great privilege to be a teacher. Just as you can't learn to play the cello intensively, you can't learn to be a lawyer intensively. You have to think, mould your mind. And I loved my teaching at Monash. I want to acknowledge another great man in the audience who taught me during the days of David Durham. Mr. Fagenbaum, I think I'm senior enough to call you Jack now. He taught me for 3 subjects more than anyone else. I yearned to be as clever as him. I never quite succeeded. He's now a very senior member of the legal profession. But that was the dedication I received. And of course, I met and fell in love with Mary Crock and married her, and was that gossip round the law school. And our 3 children were born here. Let me just say a few words about my current work. I chair one of the 10 United Nations human rights treaty bodies in our world. I chair the Committee on the Rights of We Persons with Disabilities, of which there are 1 billion of us on the planet. So my constituency is pretty broad. And disability, particularly in the developing world, is synonymous with poverty. And I'm finding this work an enormous challenge. And I have students who come and help me, chair students and teachers. My wife's helped me a bit, a very big bit actually. And my daughter Kate has helped me chair the committee. But last week, I was helped by a Monash graduate. She's here tonight, my niece, Fiona Crock. So she and I sat there as 2 Monash graduates and thought, we'll control this committee and the various countries that appear before us. But seriously, I could not have been a senior professor, a dean, senior Australian of the Year, chair of the United Nations Committee without that education. And that education was made possible in many ways by one decision, the decision of a very busy man in the Dean, David Durham, to take me on board. And I well remember after one of the classes, because he taught me in first year, he came to me and said, "You know, you could make an academic one day." And I thought, he's wrong there. But he was right. And so my message is, take a chance. Give someone an opportunity. Open your arms to the world. We have a great world. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.